Okay,
Hey.
we are good. We are live. It is showtime. It is setting us up for Facebook Live again. So we are live on Zoom. So Leigha, I am so happy to have you. You and I have known each other for close to 10 years now.
I know. Crazy.
Expert, we cannot say expert, but guru on all things sleep and women's health. So we have a lot in common that way. For those of you that are just starting to join and catching our replay, I'm interviewing my friend and colleague, Dr. Leigha Saunders. She's a fantastic naturopathic doctor and owner of the True Roots Health. Did I get that right?
Yep, True Roots Healthcare.
True Roots Healthcare in Uxbridge, Ontario. She has a private practice. Like me, she works with busy, stressed out women and optimizing hormones, helping them find digestive balance so we can be more balanced mood-wise, regulate our hormones, sleep well. And we are talking all things sleep because sleep, as I'm realizing right now with a newborn, is super sexy and comes very easily to some of us and not to others.
Yes.
So I'm excited to have you here, Leigha.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit about your journey with diving into all things sleep.
Yeah, so I have always loved sleep, and it's kind of been a bit of a joke. Like I would wake up in the morning and say, just like, I'm excited for bed. And so one year my sister got me this whole like excited for bed Christmas themed package with pajamas and masks and like all this fun stuff. But I just like always recognized that I needed adequate sleep to really feel good and as a part of my health and wellness regime and foundations. And then it was like exactly where you are now. It was around the 3-month postpartum mark where my baby went through a sleep regression, and then I had to go back to work at the same time. So I was managing the clinic and my own private practice within it. We had staff turnovers. I was trying to breastfeed and pump milk between visits. And like we were doing a home reno. It was just this crazy busy time. And admittedly, I'd probably piled on some of it myself, but I came to a point where I really realized it just wasn't normal for me to be trying to do everything that I was doing on less than 4 hours of sleep a night, especially when that sleep was broken and wasn't really any longer than like 1.5 to 2 hour intervals. And so it really started to have a profound impact on my mood and my mental health and my energy and just my ability to focus and concentrate. And it wasn't entirely evident in that moment or in those moments until like things would start showing up. I would start realizing like I made mistakes on blood requisitions. For example, I would check off the wrong tests, or I would constantly be forgetting to do something, or I would tell somebody something and then repeat it and they'd be like, oh, you told me that. Like little like small things like that. And it just gave me a new appreciation for how many people, women especially, are functioning in that chronic sleep deprivation over the long term. And it's just not okay.
It is just not okay.
It's okay in certain circumstances, right? So like postpartum, you're not supposed to be sleeping well, and you're supposed to wake up easily if your baby cries out. That's a protective mechanism. But the problem becomes once your baby starts sleeping and you don't, or you never have slept well since having kids, that we really need to take a look at what you're doing during the day to impact how well you're sleeping at night.
Or you just were never a good sleeper. Before we start to dive in and hear all of your wisdom, because I know you have such a talent for distilling all of the clinical research that doesn't feel so meaty to dive in for the average person. You have a real talent for turning that into something super practical. And I've always admired that about you. A little bit about my sleep history. Sleep is something that I'm super passionate about as well. And I'm not sure if you would have remembered this, but by the time I got to the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, so in our first and second year, I was awarded the most likely to fall asleep in class award, which is not something that anyone wants to be known for, because at that time I had such deranged sleep habits living in the residence that I could literally fall asleep at a moment's notice in class, raise my hand, answer a question, and then fall back asleep, and was having these horrid micro naps. And it got so bad to the point where I would actually see things that just were not there. And
that's happened to me too.
oh gosh, it's so scary, and was
Mm-hmm.
getting investigated for narcolepsy, that
Mm-hmm.
condition where you just fall asleep and it's
Mm-hmm.
not so great if you're driving. So my own personal story there is, it wasn't until I got married that my husband was like, none of this is normal. It's not doing wonders for your mood. And we want a family one day, and I can't trust you driving anywhere. So when we really dialed down on some of our habits, even before I started taking any kind of supplement whatsoever,
Yep.
and it made a world of difference. So I'm hoping we can spend some time today talking about some of the strategies that worked for you, that worked for some of your patients, and we can chat about what has been
Yeah.
working for some of mine. And I see a number of people joining in. This is wonderful.
Hi.
If you are joining in on Facebook, give us a heart, give us a thumbs up, maybe tag a couple of people that you know would benefit from watching the replay, so we can share this everywhere. Because we want to make sure that during these strange times when our work-life boundaries are being stomped all over and we could
Mm-hmm.
literally keep working because we're at home, or you are completely off work and don't have that structure that you used to have,
Yep.
that we're preserving our sleep. Cool?
Totally. It's awesome. I love
Awesome.
it.
So, comes up when you're finding your patients coming in that are not sleeping well? Like, what is like the most obvious thing that we can start addressing?
Sure. You just cut out there for a second. I just want to make sure I got the whole point. So just where do we kind of start if people are
Yeah.
having, yeah. So I always like to say, and if you've heard me on like any podcast or other platforms, what you start with or how you set up your day and what you're doing during the day is ultimately going to affect how you're sleeping at night. And so what we need to take a look at is like, how are you starting your morning? So what you alluded to before is a perfect place to start in terms of like maybe you're in a regular routine still with working from home. Maybe that's kind of somewhere in between. You're still working, but now your schedule has changed, or maybe you're not working at all. But if we can start with just picking a consistent wake up time for you and your body, that is hands down the most effective thing that you can start doing. It's not necessarily the easiest thing. I appreciate that. But what a consistent wake up time does is help sets your body clock on track. And so then if you say like, let's pick it at 6 a.m. in the morning, then we want you to pick a bedtime then that's about 14 to 16 hours later. So that would typically actually be between like 8 and 10 p.m. And so that's when we reach our maximal amount of sleep pressure and when we'll feel the most tired. If we push beyond then, so if you're trying to burn the candle at both ends, a lot of people have probably experienced that second wind. And you can let us know on Facebook if like you've ever stayed up too late and then all of a sudden you feel more awake and alert when you think you should be more tired, but then you actually go to bed and find that you're wide awake. So one of the easiest places to start with is just to like jump in with that consistent wake up time and then say, I'm going to set my day up for success. So getting outside and into the natural daylight can be really helpful because again, that just sends those appropriate signals to our brain that it's light, it's daytime, it's time to be awake and alert. And I love coffee. I will not tell anybody to give it up entirely. But if you are somebody who has trouble sleeping, we need to look at how you're using and potentially abusing caffeine. And
Mhm.
so it takes about the average person 12 hours to fully metabolize a cup of caffeine. So if
Wow.
you're working through this whole setup for success and you say, like, okay, my wake up time is 6 a.m., my bedtime needs to be, let's say, 10 p.m., realistically for most people, then to not consume caffeine after 10 a.m. would be the ideal goal. And then that just allows you to fully metabolize that cup of coffee or tea so that when it comes to be between 8 and 10 p.m., you're actually going to feel the full effects of the chemical in our brain and nervous system that makes us feel sleepy. And then you're more likely to fall asleep quicker and go into a deeper sleep and maintain that.
So we're not fighting ourselves at night for our our cup of coffee in the afternoon that we're using as a
Yeah.
crutch because we didn't have a good night's sleep the night before, right?
Exactly. And that's where it can be really tough and challenging to pick that consistent wake up time because you want to get up at that time, even if you've had a bad night's sleep. And so, say your sleep has been disrupted over the course of the night, doesn't matter. Get up at 6 a.m. and then make the attempt to not over caffeinate, not nap that day, because then you're just building that sleep pressure over the course of that day. So, that night, you'll be able to sleep a whole lot better. The one caveat I would say is like, as a new mom, don't listen to that. Like, sleep when you can, of course, but if you find yourself outside of that period when you're trying to maintain some form of other routine, then you definitely want to make sure that that consistent wake up time is in place.
Rural internet. So last I heard, you're talking about building that sleep pressure. Do you have
Yeah.
any strategies when we're trying to break that cycle? We've set a regular waking time, as hard as that is, when our routine is completely out the window right now for many of us. And then you there we are.
Yeah. Sorry, you were chatting sleep pressure.
Yes. Yes. So, do you have any suggestions for when we're trying to build this sleep pressure throughout the day so that we
Yep.
are ready to go to bed when we're ready to go to bed, but when many of us get that afternoon dip because
Right.
our regular routine's out the window, or we have caffeinated, or we're coming off
Yep.
of it and have a caffeine headache, what would you suggest?
So I always think about that afternoon dip as being like related to three primary things. So obviously, how are you sleeping? So if you haven't had a good night's sleep, it's understandable that you might be dipping in the afternoon. Then I like to look and see if your blood sugar is actually balanced, because I find the most common thing that women especially are lacking in the first parts of the day and in that like first half of the day really is enough protein. And so it's really easy for us to all grab a carbohydrate rich breakfast, especially like your bagel, your toast, your cereal, your oatmeal. And if you're not getting 25 to 30 grams of protein with your breakfast and lunch, then that is going to set you up for that afternoon crash because you're just running on empty until then, especially if you've had that caffeine without appropriate like fuel in your diet to actually carry you through. That caffeine gets metabolized, your blood sugar is low, and then boom, you feel super sleepy. So definitely making sure protein intake is balanced. And then stress, of course, which I'm sure is something that you commonly talk about too. And so if you're finding that, like, whether again it's from a lack of routine right now, a lack of activity, or that you're really feeling overwhelmed with the volume of work, even something as simple as doing a couple of minutes of deep breathing, and even as something as simple as like getting outside for a walk, even if it's just around your block, can just really reset your mind. It can really reset your mood. It can, again, getting outside just puts that light in our face, into our eyes, into our brain to tell our bodies what time it is and to set that up appropriately.
That's a change that blue light. But can you maybe chat a little bit more about um,
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you cut it there. I think we're just like disconnecting. Hopefully everyone's still
you
with
know what? I
us.
feel like a satellite news communicator right now, like live from
We'll roll
Spain.
with it.
Um, so blue light, I know there's so
Yes.
much research right now around light hygiene, and I think most people realize by now that there's apps on their phone that can change how much of that stimulating light they're getting versus the help you fall asleep light. Can you talk a little bit about light and hygiene and how we can go about doing that in our own lives?
Yeah. So I call it light leg because we're all like familiar with the concept of jet lag, which is when we travel a time zone and our body is stuck in the original, and so we feel the effects of that. The same thing happens with light. And so I guess it's close to 20 years ago now, the LED light bulb was invented and obviously popularized because it's so energy efficient, but it emits primarily blue light. And that is the same spectrum of light that we would get in our environment from midday, say 3 p.m., when the sun is nice and high in the sky and when we should be at maximal awakeness.
Mm-hmm.
And so because our environments are so artificially lighted now and we're exposed to blue light, say in the winter from, 5:30, 6 a.m. when we turn on when it's still dark out, all the way through until 10, 11 p.m. when again it's dark out, the light that we're getting from our artificial environment and light bulbs and computer screens and phones and things like that is primarily that blue light too. So it's just sending that signal to our brain that it's still daytime. And we think internally that it's earlier than it is because of that. So that's when a lot of people are mislabeled or misdiagnosed as having sleep onset insomnia or the trouble falling asleep, when really, if you're using a screen device up until bedtime, your body clock just hasn't had an opportunity to catch up to actually think that it's nighttime. So when it comes to sleep hygiene, one of the easiest things to do is to start turning off most of your overhead lights in your home starting around 7 p.m. And then think about mood lighting. So lamps, candles, or low level lighting, dimmers if you have them. It just creates a dimmer and darker environment in our homes to start telling our bodies that it's beginning to be nighttime. And then I've also heard, I don't actually know if this is true, but using low or eye level lighting, like a lamp or a candle on a tabletop top, mimics the sun setting. So if you think about that, the sun is like in the horizon when it's setting, and we receive that as a visual cue. So that's just one thing that I think is neat and makes sense. Regardless, like mood level lighting is helpful. And then, like you said, using an app or flipping your phone onto nighttime mode so that it blocks most of the blue light. Using blue light blocking glasses if you absolutely have to be on a screen in the evening, and then ideally just completely avoiding technology for an hour to 2 hours before your ideal bedtime is then going to allow that body clock to catch up, to understand and make melatonin, because that's what we're doing or being affected by. So that blue light is telling your body it's still midday and really suppressing that production of melatonin, which is that hormone we need to initiate sleep.
Amazing. I just want to go back real quick to the light hygiene. When we did our house, we did a full renovation, much like you, as we were expecting, and with a newborn, it's craziness. We found these really great dimmer lights. The brand was called Leviton, and they're called dim to warm lights. And they look like regular pot lights, but when they're bright, actually it's on in this room too, it's bright blue light and it's really pretty, but as you start to dim them, the lights they get dimmer, but they also get more orangey red.
Oh, cool.
And I recommend this for anyone I know that's doing renovations. They're only like $1 or $2 more than a regular pot light. But what I find is super cool is by the end of the day, when your eyes are fatigued, it is so settling and grounding to have that dim light just built in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I have, a similar type of light bulb in our bedside lamps in my room and in my son's room. And it's such an orangey light, and they're melatonin supporting. So if you do choose to use a lamp on your bedside table to like read a book, or while I'm reading little stories to him, that's the light that we have on. And I also really like those salt lamps for that reason too, because it's a regular light bulb inside, but it's filtered through the salt, which it has that pink reddish warm tinge.
Right. So we've talked about light, and I think that is one of the big things that most of us underestimate because we're pickled in this light all the time. What about building a good bedtime routine?
Yes. This is such an evident thing for kids, right? We know that we would never expect our kids to like run around or be watching TV and then plop them into bed and expect them to fall asleep. And we structure kids' bedtime routine so well for them so that they know what's coming next and they know what to expect, and they wind down and then they're settled and then they go to sleep. Somewhere along the line of growing up, we lose that, and then we just think that we're invincible and we can just like do whatever, work and answer our emails and watch the news and then just pop ourselves into bed and fall asleep quickly. And so an ideal bedtime routine is different for everybody. And I typically encourage people to disconnect in that time. I totally get it. At the end of the day, it's easy to just like scroll on social media. It's easy to binge watch Netflix series. We're usually using that as an opportunity to distract ourselves from what we don't necessarily want to check in with in ourselves. Not always, but like oftentimes I'll see people who are on receptive mode all the time, go, 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 taking care of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the day, they just want to watch TV because they haven't had any time to themselves. But really, we need to build in some time for you to be able to check in and say, like, hey, how am I doing? What am I worried about? What's on my to-do list? What do I need to decompress from? And that might be something you do alone in the shower or in a hot bath. It might be something that you talk to your partner about. It might be something that you journal. Whatever it is, it looks different for somebody, each person. So I just encourage you to try guided meditation or light stretching or yoga, or build in that routine. There's nothing that I follow strictly in the same order every night. I kind of just listen to my body. I do disconnect from technology for sure. But some nights I feel like washing off my day with a hot shower. Some nights I feel like stretching or doing some foam rolling. Most nights I have a cup of herbal tea on the couch with my husband and we just have an opportunity to connect.
Amazing. Yeah, I think the sleep procrastination is a really
Yeah, I'm just going to see. Let me just check something.
about.
Can you repeat that? Sorry, you said that sleep procrastination.
Yeah, so sleep procrastination, I think, is really real for so many of us when we're just giving all day long. We're like, damn it, I just want some
Yeah.
time for myself. But usually, if our default is Instagram or watching TV, we've been binging Star Trek right now because we're dorks. It's still like a passive seeping out of your attention. And I like what you said about consciously putting something back in.
Yeah.
And what do you say to the people? I have neighbors everywhere that you can see because everyone's home, the TV lights flickering from the bedroom, and they're always saying, like, I just need to tire out my eyes. That helps me fall asleep. Like, um, maybe we can talk a little
Like
bit about
falling
that.
asleep with the TV on?
Yeah. I mean, the fighting of one's urges to fall asleep with some background noise.
Yeah. So I notice this in myself on, say, like a Friday night when I know my week is over. So there's a subconscious stress relief that happens. And we'll often have like pizza and a bottle of wine. And then we're on the couch watching something. And I feel so tired and I have to fight so hard to not fall asleep because I'm totally relaxed and the
Yep.
TV is on in front of me. So I'm totally distracted, or actually like a funny movie or something, and you know, you have the glass of wine to have you feel sleepy, help you feel sleepy there too. And so I always liken that to the fact that, again, it's a distraction. So typically if you need to fall asleep with the TV on, it's because you need that distraction to relax. And if it's very hard and difficult, I will absolutely acknowledge, but like what you probably need to do is work a little bit on why you need that distraction in the first place. Is there something that you're anxious about? Is there something that you're worried about? Is there something that you haven't quite addressed, or you don't know how to handle, or that you feel like you don't have control over? Because typically we're resorting to social media or TV as a form of distraction from that in the evening. The tiring of the eye thing, I don't know. I haven't heard, but I would definitely say we could look at your habits in the day to say, like, how much time are you spending on screen time otherwise? And how much caffeine are you having? Because maybe you don't feel tired at the time you want to go to bed because some of those other things are obstacles for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we've talked about what I call bookending in the day. So starting your day on a strong note for your well-being and ending your day on a strong note for your well-being. And I love how you phrase that. Let's talk a little bit about the impact that sleep maybe has on your hormones, whether it is
Sure.
during pregnancy, postpartum, or through other hormonal transitions like in your 40s
Yeah.
and 50s.
Yeah. So I would say postpartum is just so unique because there's so many hormonal fluctuations that are happening. And like I said before, if you're postpartum and struggling with sleep, like just get sleep when you can. Don't expect there to be a routine until your baby has a bit of routine. And again, it's when your baby starts sleeping through the night and you're not, that there tends to be more work that we need to address underlying. I
Mhm.
always say that sleep is really a gauge of how well your nervous system is coping. And so typically, if you are going through a stressful time or period or life transition and you're struggling with sleep, it's often an underlying or a symptom of an underlying imbalance in things like cortisol being our main stress hormone,
Mhm.
particularly if you're finding that you get that tired but wired feeling at night, or you're waking up between like 3 and 5 a.m. and finding it hard to go back to sleep and not sure why you're waking up. Or waking up really early in the morning, like if your alarm would typically go off at like 6 or 6:30, but you find yourself waking up at between 4 and 6, those are often times when your cortisol is peaking at an inappropriate time. So it's a bit of a chicken or the egg scenario because the less sleep you get, the more likely you are to wake up in a physiological state of stress. So your stress hormones will be higher at baseline. But what we want to do is then some of the things we've talked about in terms of managing caffeine and light exposure and balancing stress and blood sugar so that your day to day you actually feel balanced going through, and then at night you kind of integrated those stress management pieces to help lower that cortisol. From a female hormone perspective, we'll see sleep become a huge issue for the majority of women through peri and postmenopause. And so, about 60% of women will report or it's estimated that 60% of women experience insomnia through perimenopause. I think that's an underestimation for two reasons. One is that a lot of women think they just have to live with it because so many women experience it. So they don't actually report it as a problem. And two, we know that doctors don't actually do a great job at screening for sleep disturbances. So it might be something that you experience, but when you go to your primary care physician, it's not something that's as commonly screened for as a cardiovascular disease. So when you're going through those life stages, particularly perimenopause and menopause, hormones play a huge role because estrogen and progesterone will help manage our body temperature, help manage our mood, our mental health, our hormones, and so many other things like bone health and cardiovascular health. And so it's actually like or I should say, hormone replacement therapy has been designated as an improved indication for peri and postmenopausal insomnia. And in many cases, it can be used very safely and effectively. So I think it's something that warrants a lot of attention for women in that time period.
Excellent. Yeah, it's strange and how quickly that can come about too. I noticed. I feel like I was maybe 6 weeks pregnant, and immediately my sleep changed.
Yeah.
What are the most
I lost you there for a second. Sorry, Keela. What are the most
Oh gosh, thank you so much for bearing with us. My rural internet here is a challenge. What are some of the common sleep challenges that you see through hormonal transitions?
definitely difficulty falling asleep, I
Mhm.
find, and then maintaining sleep. So often women will say they're really light sleepers and that they wake up frequently throughout the night. When they do wake up, they have trouble falling back asleep.
Mhm.
And those are some really key indicators, again, around like how your nervous system is functioning and what we can do to support you there.
Amazing. So, if we're noticing that there's some really unhelpful, unproductive sleep patterns, it's almost like our body's saying, like, come on, figure it out. Like, we got to go deeper.
Mhm.
From a health supportive perspective, what are some of the investigations or things that a physician?
Yeah. So, what I always say is like, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling fatigued, then start with really making sure that there's not an underlying medical condition. that is actually contributing to that fatigue, if that makes sense. So maybe you're actually getting enough sleep and you're not feeling rested. So then maybe we need to take a look at to say, like, are you deficient in iron or B12, or do you have hypothyroidism or something like that? If otherwise you're getting good night's sleep and those things all come back as normal, then we might want to look into the quality of your sleep. And so the best thing to do, or the gold standard for that, is actually a sleep lab or a sleep study. And you do need to be referred from your family physician for that. I would also say, if you think that you're at risk at any way of sleep apnea, to make sure that you advocate strongly for that referral. And so there's a questionnaire you can do online called the Stop Bang, STOPBANG. And so it's just 8 really simple questions you can answer to see if you have a high likelihood or at high risk of having sleep apnea. That we know is lifestyle based too. Like if you're overweight or have a high neck circumference, you're more likely to have sleep apnea. So there's things that we can do to address those risk factors for you. Otherwise, what I encourage a lot of people to do at home is to track their sleep using an app. So I have no affiliation, but there's a really great app called Sleep Cycle Smart Alarm. And you either put it on your bedside table or put it under your pillow, and you can put it on airplane mode so there's no notifications or data coming through. And it will track your sleep cycles to give you an indication of how long it takes you to fall asleep, the quality of your sleep overnight. And then you can also put tags in. So like if you exercised, or if you felt really stressed, or if you worked in the evening, you can put those tags in before you go to sleep. And then it starts accumulating the habits, good and bad, that and how it affects your sleep.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
That
And
sounds like
people find it really informative and yeah, really helpful.
I mean, we all love learning more about ourselves, and that sounds a lot more nuanced than is what's going on with my Fitbit, how's my REM sleep, and I'm sure
Yeah,
you
exactly.
have lots of questions about that throughout the
Yeah.
day.
And the thing that's neat about that one too, actually, is if you do snore, it records you.
Oh my goodness.
So if you're in denial, or if you're like, I don't know if I have sleep apnea, it will actually pick up those episodes. So again, it's not a perfect test, but it's something that gives you a bit more information to work with.
Well, Leigha, you are sleep magic. You have got this little girl snoring, 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 which is what we wanted during this time. And I want to respect yours and everyone else's time here. I know you are super full right now, but is there anything else, any other resources that you want to point our viewers towards to learn a little bit more about their sleep?
Yeah, so I'm super active on Instagram. If anybody else wants to hang out with me there, I'm Dr. Leigha Saunders ND, and I've got a couple freebies linked up through my profile there. So there's a 7 tips for a good night's sleep. There's a mini training, and any podcast episodes and recordings that I do like this, just talking about sleep and dropping all my top sleep tips. I always link up and post there. So I'd love to hang out and engage, and you can ask me any sleep questions that you have through Instagram.
That is phenomenal. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Leigha. I just appreciate how practical you are with sleep. And I know it's something that you and I are both quite passionate about.
Absolutely.
And on that note, what I appreciate is that we weren't really talking about supplements. And I know that's often
I love it.
the place that people go to is what can I do? But if our habits are not working for us, then it takes a lot of supplementation to outdo that. The one thing I did want to highlight, just to add on to what you're doing, I have just launched a course very recently called From Fine, where most of us feel like we're fine, but we're not, to freaking fabulous. And the idea is how we can stop feeling fatigued, bloated, and hormonal. And it's a 10-day video series. Each video is under 10 minutes, coming to your inbox. All the things that I think we wish our patients knew before they came to see us. So I'm going to drop the link to join that in our chat box and in our Facebook as well. But I certainly encourage any of you that are joining us live and on the replay to check out what Leigha's up to, because she is brilliant with all things sleep and also super entertaining and has an adorable family.
Awesome. I so appreciate it.
Anything else that you'd like to add?
I just think everybody should check out your course, because of course, sleep is just one part of what makes a foundation for health. And so I think in these times, we need to do whatever we can to support our health. And we know that our baseline level of health puts us at at better odds, let's say, when facing any type of condition, disease, pandemic. So the more that anybody can do to support their health on a day-to-day basis, I say go for it.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for
You're
joining us today,
welcome.
Leigha. And to
Thanks,
everybody else,
everyone.
good luck through these strange times. We are all in this together, and I'm going to be coming back at you for the next couple of weeks with more episodes of Let's Figure It Out. Thank you so much,
Awesome.
Leigha.
Thanks, Leigha. Bye.
Bye.